The event described by Dr. Ford presumably happened on a weekend because I believe everyone worked and had jobs in the summers. If the party described by Dr. Ford happened in the summer of 1982 on a weekend night, my calendar shows all but definitively that I was not there.
That Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh insistent that the incident Christine Blasey Ford would have been on a weekend, that incident she describes. But take a look at the judge's calendar, at July in particular. On July the 1st, it reads, go to Timmy's for skis with Judge Tom P.J. Burney ski. It is safe to assume, in light of what we learned this week, FBI agents are going to spend some time looking at that day in particular. My panel is back with me, and I want to turn to Joyce Vance, who's down in Texas first. Joyce, to what degree do you think this is going to be the focus of this investigation? You saw during the course of these hearings when the Republican senators were still using Rachel Mitchell, still using this outside prosecutor to ask questions, and she was honing in on that date. She was getting very close to it, and I noted that when she got there, that's when her service to the committee seemed to end. Republicans stopped using her at that. Your sense, Joyce, of the importance of that date?
That did seem to be the cutoff point for Rachel Mitchell. She sort of got the hook from the committee after she began to focus on Judge Kavanaugh's calendar. And it seems fair to focus on his calendar because he has held them out to be reliable. I think that what we'll ultimately see is that reference to ski on July 1st is a reference to brewskis, and the judge has acknowledged his love of beer. So this seems like a great place for the FBI to begin its inquiry, identifying all of the participants, looking at the likely location, seeing whether it's a match with Dr. Ford's story. They'll be able to drive her to the location if they can identify it and engage in all sorts of techniques designed to determine whether or not this could be the date that Dr. Ford is referring to in her testimony.
And Joyce and I weren't the only ones here. Sheldon Whitehouse, the senator from Rhode Island, was honing in on this as well. Let's play a little bit of tape of him talking about that date in particular.
Dr. Ford said that Kavanaugh and Judge and PJ and at least one other boy were all at a house. Well, we know Bart Kavanaugh was there because it's his schedule. And here's Judge, and here's PJ. Here are all those three named boys and others at a house together, just as she said.
Lisa, I want to get your reaction to just looking around here at these calendars, just reaction to them generally. What's listed there, the utility they're going to have to investigators as they open up this background check once again.
Oh, it's an extraordinarily helpful document because there are names, sometimes first and last names, and the FBI agents who are charged with getting additional have actual human beings to reach out to. It is interesting to me that this is something that Kavanaugh himself put forth, along with an explanation that these parties took place on weekends. I guess you could call July 1st a pre-kend day.
There you go.
Because it entered into a holiday.
Right.
But it is a Thursday, and there it is in full display, and I'm sure the FBI will take full advantage of the material, not just friends, doctor's appointments. I think it's all open. For them to look at.
Katie, there was a moment when this comes up in the hearing. The judge is talking about this calendar. He's talking about how he used it. He used it to write down what was going to happen. He used it as a diary as well, cramming stuff into these, 1 inch by 1 inch squares about what happened in his life. But more broadly, and we saw it a bit there in what Senator Whitehouse was saying, there was a real focus at this hearing on drinking, on partying, and you saw the judge really bristle every time this came up.
He drinks a lot, and he should just own it. I mean, and I'm not trying to be, blasé. Maybe he does have an alcoholism problem. I don't know. But the fact that he is chipped away in terms of his credibility on the smaller things, it's one thing to just blanket deny, I did not assault Dr. Christine Ford. That's one thing. But when you sit there and you kind of progressively keep on denying and lying about things that we all know is true. Disclaimer, I went to Yale. We drank a lot. Okay? There's going to be people at Yale that can say, we drank a lot. That's what's going to happen. A lot of people are going to come forward, and they've already come forward and are going to say, he's full of it. He drank a lot. And so for him to sit there and try to take the Alamo, have his Alamo be on the fact that he wasn't a big drinker, I mean, these types of things make him seem less credible. And again, this is the Supreme Court justice that we're looking at. That was a job interview. And you know what? Even if the Senate Republicans wanted to just ram this through, it does chip away at his credibility. And so if you look at these calendar entries, you're going to start asking yourself, well, who's Suzanne and who's Nikki and why did he go to the doctor? And then you're going to start saying, did the guy have a problem? Let's talk to the women. I mean, it opens up, I think, a Pandora's box of problems for Brett Kavanaugh, not for Dr. Ford.
There's moments in that hearing where he's able to in such a crystal clear sense remember things that occurred. There was a question about what he said about coming back to Yale Law School after going to a Red Sox game. He could remember George Brett was there. He could remember Roger Clemens was pitching. He paid for all the tickets, which continues to perplex me, how he had the money to do that when he was a law school student. But Pete, I want to turn to you. We were talking about elitism, elites, prep schools, and all of that. There was a piece in The Atlantic by Megan Garber. I'll quote from that. The country learned a lot this week about the rarefied culture of prep schools and colleges and the elite institutions into which those schools fed. What's your takeaway from this week on that point? Well, he maintained that it wasn't that he busted his tail, as he put it, to get into Yale Law School. But we did learn a lot about, certainly, this network of schools that surrounds Washington, D.C.
Well, first of all, Megan Garber's a great writer, and men should be reading all of these women, all of these writers, and all of their accounts, and everything that they're saying. Michelle Goldberg at the New York Times, Rebecca Traister, Zerlina Maxwell, everybody. But the idea that most Americans have no idea what this is like. I grew up in upstate New York. We were a middle-class family. We grew up in farmland.
There was no beach week, suffice to say.
There was no beach week. Yeah. But the idea, I coached lacrosse when I was 20 here in New York City at one of the most elite private schools. I won't even name it, but I couldn't believe it. I had no idea that this life existed. It cost $40,000 just for kindergarten. Who has that money? Who has that money? But more important, this calendar, like, it's crazy that we're looking at this calendar, and it's crazy that we're being asked to believe what he is saying. Are we supposed to think that Beach Week, which is the first thing we all saw, was him making sandcastles and saving whales, playing paddleboard? We know what happens at Beach Week, and you don't have to be in a private school. We know what happens. And he didn't help himself, and this calendar doesn't help himself, and I yield my time to the legal experts.
I'll have the last word on this, Zerlina.
Look, I think what was interesting is he put out the calendar as evidence to help his own case. You know, he put out evidence that actually corroborates her story, which I found really surprising, because she has never seen this calendar, and somehow she was able to have her version of events match the July 1st calendar entry. Additionally, I'm not even going to say his name because, you know, poor guy, and who knows where this is going to go. He's probably going to get dragged in further. But one of the other references of July 1st is that other person that was the look-alike Brett Kavanaugh.
Target,
correct.
Yeah.
And so I think that person is also on the July 1st entry. And so did Brett Kavanaugh know ahead of time, before all of this came out, that July 1st is actually the day it happened, and that's why they picked the look-alike person who was at the party that day, according to his calendar.
When it comes to that date. All right, up next, how women across the country are responding to the Kavanaugh Ford hearing. We're going to hear Anita Hill's reaction next.